Hi all, Brady Mile from Ag Innovation Australia here. Today we're going to do a walkthrough of the environmental accounting platform for a livestock focused property in Western Australia. And to get set up, you just go log in. If you don't have an account just yet, you can create one with a few easy steps, which I'll show you just here. Yeah, so you get a code sent to your email. Enter here. And you get set up. Yeah, you just put in your details here. Put in what commodities you do. So today we're going to be doing beef, sheep, accept the terms and conditions, and up to located in there, and data usage consent. So with the platform, we are NFF data code certified. So if you use the platform, you can be rest assured that your data is secure with us and we don't share it with third parties. Go to account over here, there is the option of adding advisors to view your account. So for example, if you have an agronomist or a trusted advisor, you can invite them in, they can see your account. They can either just look at it, edit it, or control it. And really up to you what level of access you want to give other people to the account. Zoom in to the parcel of land you are working with and click it as so. Or you can also just do it in the ether as well. So if you want to do it in the ether, you just put your details in here, say what commodities you're on. So we know we're doing beef and sheep. But in this particular property, we also have some forage crops. So we're just going to go grains here, which means that we can add in the forage crop pasture because that accounts for fertilizer use and chemical use separately, and some plantings as well, because we want to claim sequestration from the trees we have in our property. All right, continued going down. Region, that will be auto-filled if you select the parcel. And then rainfall, it's either above or below 600 mil, and that affects how leaching is calculated from fertilizer in the calculator. So obviously in the southwest of Western Australia, yes, we are about 600 mil. And then you just click confirm to get stuck into the calculation. So where we input our data is down here. Now, out of the three, mapping, you can do if you're really keen, but it's pretty advanced. I wouldn't recommend it for your first cut. Down here for products and commodities, it's only relevant if you export finished products from your property, which 99% of farmers don't do. They just do commodities, so you can ignore that one. The main action happens here in business activities, where you can see that all the commodities we listed when we were setting up the property are here. So we've got beef, sheep, cropping, pasture, trees. You'll notice here that there's a year for each commodity. This is important because, one, when you're doing emissions assessment for the whole of enterprise, it's the emissions for that year. And two, how the calculator works in your results at the end here is, unfortunately, it only picks up emissions for inputs that run exactly for the year you're measuring. So once it loads, you will see that it's gone for the calendar year last year, and hey, zero emissions, awesome, carbon neutral. But in reality, I'm running my mobs to the financial year. So we go last financial year, and all of a sudden you will see the results picked up here. So when you do your business activities, I would recommend you choose an emissions year, whether that's a financial year, whether that's a calendar year, and put everything in there. So to create a mob, we'll just go add. You do the name of the mob and the year. So once again, make sure you pick an emissions year and everything lines up to that. So for this one, we're doing a emissions year that lines with the financial year. So we go June to July. When you get in here, you will notice that there's breeding livestock and trading livestock up the top. Okay, if you do them both together, if you just want to chuck all your sheep together. But as I said, for me, I prefer to do it separately. So when you're setting up a herd or a mob, you'll see down the side you have your livestock categories. You just got to turn them on and off if that category of animal is present. So obviously in our breeding livestock, we have our breeding ewes. So we'll go into it. And you will see that this is where your main data inputs are. And for a livestock farmer, this is where the majority of your emissions are coming from. So to start off with, you start off with the number of animals at the start of your emissions year. So we have 320. And you'll see we're changing the number of ewes you have, that there's two ways to do it. You can go down this column, which is births, deaths, and aging, and changes from purchases and sales. So here we can see that we've had a sale, which is selling our oldest ewes. So it's just a case of you go through, you say whether it's a sale or purchase. And down here, there's two ways you can add in its weight. You can either enter the total directly, e.g. there might be some scales in the truck or something, or you can calculate total per an average weight per an animal, which personally I'd recommend to go calculate total. Similarly, down here, we have maiden ewes aging up and being joined. So you just add 80 here. And similar, if you had a couple die, you can just do like, -2. Down the right-hand side here, we also have little notes, which is something that I like to do as just a way to keep track of changes I'm making. On the right-hand side, you also got your lambing rates as well, so just add it in here. In terms of live weight gain, we might just jump to our maiden breeding ewes quickly. All right, so with your live weight, it's just calculated monthly, and the expectation is you're not measuring it every month, right? It's just a best guess based on conditioning and the time of the year as well. So here, you can see I've just done some consistent growth rates for maiden breeding ewes that are still growing. And similarly for my ewes, I just added on a couple kilograms over spring, took off a couple kilograms over summer and autumn to show those changes there. Let's go into trading mob FY25. I'll just quickly demonstrate here that you'll notice for my trading mob, nothing in breeding, but there is in trading. So if we go look at ewe lambs, we can see that we've bought some in. So we've just gone add sale. Add purchase, I should say. So the purchase in here, you calculate the total per an animal rather than direct amount, unless you're getting a measurement from the truck, and you go on there. And then similarly, obviously you have the sale later on in the year. All right, save here. And then we go to shearing. So you add individual shearing events, which is done by animal class. So we go on here, we can see that we have our weather lambs. And then when you select the category, the tool recognizes how many number of that class are on the farm at that month. So obviously it's picked up 100. You say if all 100 have been shorn, and you go shorn wool for an animal in kilograms, and then total clean wool yield, which unfortunately you do need to manually calculate it. It might be stenciled on the wool bale, or if not, it's just a case of multiplying the amount of wool shorn per an animal by the clean wool percentage, in this case 65%. So that 3 is now 2, and then multiply by the amount of animals equals 200. Once again, you just might need a bit of pen and paper to work out that one. Next, we'll go on to feed. That if pasture and cropping are once again sorted separately, if you hadn't added the pasture and cropping commodities before, if you turn this on, it will create the category for you right at the start of business activities. But we go into mineral blocks. Here it's just a case of saying total amount used of tons and then the percentage of it, the percentage of urea in the product. If you want to get really in depth with feed as well, you can go to feed breakdown, which is dry matter digestibility. But this is automatically calculated. Once again, it's probably similar to mapping. It's an advanced feature of the tool. Probably don't need to have a crack at this during your first run through. If you have anything like hay and grains, that is counted in the category of energy and commodity consumption, which we'll get to in a second. Have a quick look at cattle herds. So we go on to breeding herd FY25. You can see it's the same principle that you just click on what classes of animals you have present, and then you work on their average head and live weight. But if you go into it, you see with the live weight calculation, it's done on average daily live weight gain. Another difference as well is you'll notice for changes from births, deaths, and aging, instead of a cell, you put a number into either plus or minus, you put in an individual event. And with these individual events as well, you can see that there's aged in, births, deaths, there's not aging out. Aging out, you have to just put under other removals. So we go on to our pastures. Here, this is where you account for your chemical and fertilizer emissions. So the first thing you do is you say how the hectares of pastures. If you've done some mapping, you can select the individual paddocks, or you can just put in the amount of hectares here. Then you go into soil improvements, which you just add the event here. And then when you're in there, you just select what sort of fertilizer it is from the drop down. It calculates the elements, and then you do the application rate per hectare, because the emissions are actually calculated by the elements, not the actual fertilizer. And if we move on to the next one of chemical application, which wasn't done in our pastures, but was done in our silage crops. It's similar principle. You just choose the type of chemical from the drop down. So herbicide, pesticide, fungicide type here. And then the application rate per hectare. And then the emissions are actually calculated by the active ingredients. And that's why it's broken down here. If your chemicals aren't here, you can also calculate by total active ingredient, where you just need to work out how many tons, not kilograms, of active ingredients were applied in total, which would just be a case of, you go the application rate per hectare, multiply by the rate of active ingredient, and then multiply by the amount of hectares you have. But it's a lot easier to work through this one. As you can see here, it's things like electricity, fuel use, and commodities brought into the farm. So here, if we go into electricity FY25, try and line up these dates to the emissions year. It's not by month, it's by particular day. So that's just a little feature to note. The emission source, about whether it's non-renewable or renewable, and then the amount used in kilowatts. So that information you might find handy on your BAS statement. We go on to fuel consumption. Here you can see there's different types of fuel, which you would need to do an individual event, say if you have a mixture of diesel and petrol. Once again, hopefully this information is handy on the BAS statement. Or if you're running tractors, you might be able to do benchmarking per hectare. Now, with commodity purchases, there's 3 categories: hay, grain, and cottonseed. And once again, it's just a case of saying the amount purchased in tons. So we now need to go to allocation of enterprises to allocate these emissions to our commodities that are actually coming off farm. So if we go into electricity, we can see that we've just split them between beef and sheep mobs. once again, it has to be a rough guess, right? And nobody tracks level data to that level. Similar to our silage as well, because it stays on farm, we need to attribute this to our livestock as well. So we just go on here and attribute it to our livestock. And then similarly with trees as well, that you can allocate that sequestration to where you want. So for me personally, I've done it to my sheep, for example. Just before you move off from this tab, you want to make sure that all the numbers line up to 100% to make sure these emissions are 100% allocated to the commodities coming off farm. So once again, nothing's going to come up here because it's running on a calendar year, not our emissions year, which is aligned to our financial year. We'll just give it a second to load. So we'll change it to our financial year, which will give our emissions profile for FY25. So if we go down here, we can see our scope 1 emissions from emissions actually happening on farm, our scope 2 emissions from electricity, as you can see, not too much, and then our scope 3 emissions that have come from our supply chain, and then also our carbon sequestration from our trees. Down here, you will notice that our results are on methane, nitrous oxide, and CO2. Whether our results are up here in TCO2E, that's because all emissions are translated into carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide equivalent, similar to livestock, how you might be running on DSEs or AEs to make equivalent benchmarks. Emissions are the same. That to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, you do everything in CO2E. Now, if we go into our down here, we can go see our emissions per individual commodities. So if we go look at sheep, there's a more detailed emissions breakdown other than just the source. So here we can see the amount coming from enteric methane, the amount coming from livestock we brought in from our trading mob, and other things such as nitrous oxide from urine and dung, etc., etc. Now, when comparing apples to apples, we know that no farm in Australia is the same. So emissions intensity is probably your most important number. So down here, we can see our emissions intensity for our sheep meat and our wool. So here we can see, because I've allocated my trees, it's a little bit lower for each run. So I get credit for the trees out of my block. And if we have a look at this compared to the previous financial year, the numbers are a little bit higher. Now, apologies, I didn't check in advance to see how the season actually went during that period in the southwest of WA. But here, I made an assumption during my hypothetical calculation that FY25 was a better season than FY24. So the reason why emissions are about 15-20% higher in FY24 as opposed to FY25 is lower lambing rates, lower live weight gain, and also more commodities such as hay and grain brought in, which has affected my emissions profile. All right, we'll wrap up there. Once again, thanks for GGA for supporting us making this video. Thank you.